pleasure to welcome what I feel like is a cybersecurity royalty into the room. With
royalty's kind of out of favor these days, right? So, but thank you.
one of the veterans. So yeah, I mean, where do I start with all the companies that you've been involved with, Bob? But I think that mainly Allegis Capital. But I was actually with someone last night at the Munich RE and Ballistic event, and he told me to say to you and to ask you about Wyoming iced wine, and then ask you if you were able to guess who I was speaking to.
Well, all right. So I've talked to a few people about growing ice wine in Wyoming, so you have to give me a little bit more.
He shares your son.
That one.
Yeah. So yeah, he said to look forward and to enjoy this episode.
That one. Oliver, I appreciate you having me. I really do.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. I mean, in all seriousness, where do we start with your background? How did you get into cyber many moons ago?
The journey is an accidental journey, to be brutally honest. I'd love to tell you there was a plan, and the plan was really driven by probably my ADHD, and just what sounded interesting. So, educational background is computer science. I'm classically an operating systems guy. Jumped very early in my career to the world of startups, and had the good fortune of being involved in building 2 startup companies here in Silicon Valley. A company that turned out to be the leading Unix operating system house in the world, and I was the CEO, and we had offices around the world. Back when sort of open systems got going and was based largely on the Unix operating system. Subsequently worked on creating the open systems market more formally, and then did another startup, a little company called InfoGear, which actually built the original iPhones. And so that was sort of my dalliance with hardware and with consumer-oriented technology. But along the way, I had the really good fortune of being backed by 2 great venture capital firms, Sequoia Capital and New Enterprise Associates, and both
just small names.
Both of them really encouraged me to think about when I was at a point where I was thinking about what's next, to consider a career in venture capital. So, back in 1996. Really brought what is now AllegisCyber Capital into being as the co-founder of that firm. And, the journey there really was relevant to our conversation today is our work in cybersecurity. So Allegis started off being a broad-based early-stage technology venture firm. But as we began to look at sort of what was going on with the internet, sort of the digitization of the global economy, became really fascinated with the security implications in all of its manifestations. And so back in 2000, we started making cybersecurity investments, and cybersecurity became a larger and larger percentage of what we're doing. It turned out we were pretty good at it. I think combination of the operating background in a domain where there wasn't a lot of operating experience, but deep technical background, and frankly, curiosity, really kind of pulled us more and more into cyber, to the point that AllegisCyber became the first dedicated cyber venture firm in the world, did the first dedicated cyber venture funds in the world. And we've had a great 24 years in cybersecurity. And then about 8 years ago, we kind of expanded the platform with the creation of DataTribe, our foundry in Maryland, which operates on a standalone basis but is integrated with the Allegis platform to begin starting companies. We just got to that place where I would get frustrated that I couldn't find a solution to a problem that I thought was important. And it says, well, you know how to start companies, go start it. And so we began building companies at Allegis, and with some success there, decided to create a platform which would do 2 things, really focus on starting companies, but also continuing to expand this playbook we had developed around taking expertise out of the offensive cyber community and applying it to building defensive solutions. And a lot of that involved transitioning offensive teams out of national intelligence. And, for many years, we moved teams from Maryland, home of the National Security Agency, out to Silicon Valley. And about 8 years ago, when we were having this conversation with ourselves, it was clear that we could no longer relocate those teams. It's just the economics just didn't make sense. So we set up a platform called DataTribe in Maryland, which we describe as a foundry. And DataTribe's mission in life is to identify highly disruptive, unique technology, usually with an offensive origin, coming out of national intelligence, and to take those teams and build next generation defensive capabilities, around their expertise. And that program has been highly successful and pretty unique in the world. So
yeah, awesome. And I shared a lift with your DataTribe co-founder this morning as well. Mike, yeah. And he said to ask you about the offense to defense in relation to DataTribe.
A quick one here from Oliver, one of the co-founders of Asperon Search. Our CyberBytes podcast showcases the security ecosystem's most exciting companies, but we do much more. Our talent solutions give security vendors the competitive advantage by building high-performing go-to-market and technical teams globally. If you're looking for your next role or need to hire the best talent in this competitive market, then reach out to us directly via our info@email in the show notes. Let's get back to it.
Well, look, I think it's one of our early on observations. Cyber is unlike any other sector of technology innovation where there actually is an offense. No other area of technology is there an offense. In cyber, there is an offense. And the offense, technically just as capable as the defense, sometimes better motivated in terms of financial remuneration, things like that, and totally unconstrained in their behavior. There are no rules. And so they are really the ones that pace innovation in cybersecurity, whether that's national intelligence, whether it's criminal groups, whether it's hacktivists. They're the ones that wake up every day trying to figure out how to compromise your infrastructure and bend it to their nefarious goals, whatever they may be. And so that observation was, if you don't understand where the offense is going, all you can do is react to where they manifest themselves. And so our observation was, if you want to engage seriously, if you want to build the next generation of effective, efficient cyber defense, you need to understand where the offense is going. There was a great Canadian hockey player by the name of Wayne Gretzky, and his nickname was always the Great One. And they would always ask Gretzky, what makes you so much better than everyone else? He said, well, hockey players skate to where the puck is. He said, I skate to where the puck is going to be. And that's always stuck in my head in terms of the ability to understand, how the engagement with the adversary is going to develop, to be able to anticipate where the offense will show up and meet them there, at that point of engagement with effective defense. And so the DataTribe playbook, early on started at Allegis, but then really became the focal point of the strategy at DataTribe, is identify teams that are on the cutting edge of offense and use them and their expertise to build the next generation of defense. You're usually ahead of the market, which is a good place to be. That there's a lag between offense developing a capability and it manifesting in the wild as a major new threat vector. It's usually 4 to 6 years. But that playbook has worked very, very effectively for us. Just a proof point, Dragos in industrial security. And I think you guys have worked with the team at Dragos.
Yeah.
At DataTribe, we started with 3 engineers, core of the offensive industrial cyber team at the National Security Agency. Just incredibly smart around not just the technology, but how you would compromise the technology to achieve whatever a national intelligence objective might be. And pulling Rob Lee and his 2 co-founders out and say, okay, let's apply your domain expertise, which is considerable. You understand the mindset of the hacker. You understand how they would go at compromising critical infrastructure. Let's apply all of that knowledge to build the defensive response to these attacks, which we think are going to become more prevalent. At the time that we started Dragos, the conventional wisdom, even within sort of the inner circle of cyber experts and venture capital, and there are about 10 of those people, in my opinion, the reaction I got from that group was, Bob, you realize there's no industrial cyber market. And my reaction was, that is a historically accurate statement, that that's going to change.
Look at it now.
And now, it's recognized as the existential threat to critical infrastructure. It is an entirely new sector. And Dragos, in my opinion, is the leader in that sector. So
So just rewinding back to when you found Rob and his two co-founders. So you did you proactively go and seek them for?
we had built a reputation of pulling people out of the NSA, that were very entrepreneurial, had something they wanted to do, who were struggling. And so, a lot of them, they come out of the NSA, they would try and get funded in Maryland, raise their seed capital in Maryland. There was no infrastructure for building companies. There's phenomenally deep technical expertise in Maryland in and around cybersecurity, life sciences as well. But there wasn't a tradition of leveraging that intellectual property to build product companies. It was really research and development oriented. And so, they would bounce around in Maryland, Orrin Falkowitz, who did Area 1, popped up to Boston trying to find where is there a source of capital to help me build a company. And I would start identifying those teams and moving them out to Silicon Valley. And like I said, about 8 years ago, that math all fell apart. You just could no longer relocate those teams. And so Mike and I had actually worked on pulling a team out of the NSA, a couple of brothers, the Witt brothers, and we started a company called Onyara, which was a big data company. So if you follow technology, NiFi, Niagara Files, Apache NiFi, that technology was developed at the NSA for handling massive data sets. And we worked with them to pull the technology out into open source, and then picked up the team that developed that technology at the NSA and started Onyara.
How does that work? If you're pulling essentially a tool or a capability that was developed within the government, how do you actually pull that out?
Well, the NSA licensed technology, we choose not to pursue that path. So if there is a technology element we're interested in, we'll usually exfiltrate it into open source, and it just establishes, a new chain of custody on that technology that will address any concerns people may have about, is there something in there we're not aware of? And so open source eliminates that entire set of questions. Or sometimes you just pick up a team, and the intellectual property is in their head. But it's been a very successful program. Onyara was a great example. 6 months after starting the company, we sold the company. Now that was kind of an inflection point for DataTribe, because I was convinced that we had the next $1 billion company, and we had an offer on the table for 6 engineers with a little bit of consulting revenue, no product revenue, for $50 million. So the venture
6 months.
So the venture capitalist in me is like, this is a $1 billion idea. We need to build a company. The entrepreneurs, frankly, to their credit, were looking at a success that they never anticipated. Both still had student loans that need to be paid off, and it was a significant payday for them. And so, their bias was, I never thought I'd have this kind of money. Let's sell the company. And there was a dynamic there, which was, we're selling $1 billion company for $50 million. This is a mistake. But we have a very entrepreneur-centric culture. We really view ourselves as almost co-founders or co-builders with entrepreneurs. And so, most of the time, if I can't convince you, I'm going to side with you. But what came out of that is that Mike and I having this conversation, I was metaphorically laying in front of the train to stop it. It's like, we cannot allow this to happen. And when we didn't prevail, I looked at Mike and I said, that will never, ever happen again. We're going to build a platform. We're going to build the infrastructure so that we can grow these companies here. Take what we've just learned, what we've just experienced. And basically it was, let's take the Silicon Valley playbook, which we understand very well. Let's relocate it to Maryland. Let's create a pool of capital. Almost create a halfway house for wannabe entrepreneurs leaving national intelligence, where they have a partner that can bring the expertise, the network, the capital, the know-how to work with them to take their technical expertise, what I call their domain expertise, and shape and form that into a viable business plan that we can develop, validate, and get to a place where they're ready to engage with the traditional venture community. And that became the focal point for DataTribe. And we start 3 companies a year. Basically, they're our operating team, highly capable. It's not a traditional venture fund because we've got to bring so much of the operating experience to the technical co-founders. But we've got a team that all have engineering degrees, that all have MBAs, that have all got 3 to 5 startups. So they know how mechanically to build a company. So they fuse with those technical teams. We provide the capital, they live with us, and our job is to develop a business strategy that can be validated, gather the proof points, leverage our global network, and get them ready for the Series A financing. And we'll participate in that process. There's actually a fund at DataTribe that sits behind the foundry that will provide follow-on financing as well. So it's, my observation on cyber, and I think you'll appreciate this, cyber is very, very unique. It's technically complex. It moves very, very quickly. It's incredibly dynamic. And I don't think you can do cyber part-time. To me, it's analogous to doing life sciences part-time. Somebody walked into me and said, I've got the cure to cancer. And I'd say, well, yeah, I want to cure cancer, but whether it's a good idea or a bad idea or the merits against other ideas, I would have absolutely no idea. Cyber is very much the same way. You really need to be deeply enmeshed in the domain to understand, is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Is there a better idea? That back to being able to anticipate where the next generation of threats like industrial security are likely to manifest. That requires a lot of domain expertise in building a strong presence within the community. And so my belief is cyber, if you don't do it full time, particularly early stage, you're going to have a very, very difficult time. And I think we've observed that over the last 3 years as the market's recalibrated. A lot of people that were chasing momentum in cyber have really kind of pulled back, not because cyber is any less important. It's still growing at 12%, year over year, but it's demonstrated how complex it is, and that there's a lot of me too, undifferentiated capability out there that's not going to lead to profitable returns. Well, when you look at what we've done either at Allegis or you look at what we've done at DataTribe, it's deep, deep, deep domain expertise in cybersecurity. And I think that's what gives us as investors an unfair competitive advantage. But it's also part of what we try to bring to the teams we're working with. The fact that we know who all the great operators are. We know all the customers in the world. We understand all the distribution channels. Cyber operates a lot like life sciences. The fact that most cyber companies will never be big public companies. They will be acquired early on. Life sciences works the same way. All of the innovation comes from young, innovative, disruptive startups. And when they get their validation of their science, through a phase 1 or a phase 2 clinical trial, they get acquired by big pharma, which puts them through the phase 3 clinical trials, brands them, puts them through their distribution channels. Cyber operates much the same way in most cases. Every so often you'll have a breakout, you'll have a CrowdStrike, you'll have a Dragos that will become, defining public companies in new sectors or important sectors. But the vast majority of cyber companies, once they get that validation of the efficacy of their solution, they're going to be acquired by big tech, who's saying, cyber is a greenfield market. Our core IT market's growing at 3% per annum. We need to find a way to bring more growth into our enterprise, leveraging our customer set and our distribution channels, and they'll be the ones that will step in and acquire. But there's understanding that ecosystem and how the ecosystem works and the players in the ecosystem is absolutely essential to being successful.
You made a very interesting phrase, which was it gives you an unfair advantage. And I don't think you choosing to be a domain expert is an unfair advantage. I think it's...
to me, it's common sense.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
I mean, if you don't have an advantage, you're competing with everybody else based on valuation.
Exactly.
That comes right out of the return. So why would I want to do that?
It comes from your choice to only focus on.
Well, and being able to, again, understand where's the puck going to be, who is aligned with where the puck's going to be, understanding the difference between good, great, and out of this world, phenomenally game-changing. And then knowing how to take those teams and really become their partner. I tell people all the time, I'm not a financier. I build companies. Along the way, I deploy capital. But my job, as a former operating executive, and I really still view myself as an operating executive, is to bring the totality of my experience in building companies to bear on a young entrepreneurial team that's got a vision, and help them de-risk. I used to, when I was teaching at Berkeley, the MBA program, I used to talk about, the role of an entrepreneur, it's like dancing in a minefield in the middle of the night, right? There are two ways to get through that minefield successfully. right? On your hands and knees, very slowly crawling through the minefield, slows you down. Time is your enemy in this world. Or go get a map. Somebody who's been through the minefield before, that can say, here's where the mines are, and here's how you can cut a shortcut through that minefield. Our job, my opinion, is to be a map. It's to bring the totality of that experience, the fact that we've done this a number of times, we've done it successfully, we know how to get through the minefield. It doesn't mitigate the unanticipated. The tech didn't work. It was a great idea, but it turned out to not be possible. That happens. That's life. That's part of innovation. And you have to accept that not all innovation will be successful.
On that point, because you saw the future trend of creating an industrial cybersecurity market, were there any trends that you thought would take off that did?
I think there are, from an investor's perspective, but this would relate to an entrepreneur as well. There are two aspects of getting it right. One is the fundamentals, right, or the tech. The other is timing. And timing turns out to be the most difficult part, because the longer it takes, the more capital is required. And now you're dealing with the macroeconomic environment where capital may or may not be available. We went through a very long haul where capital was readily available, and cyber had a tailwind behind it. People could not put enough money into cyber. So mediocre ideas were getting capitalized, really driven by greed in the venture community to participate in that growth. But then the market shifted, and all of a sudden the cost of capital went from zero to unaffordably high, if it was available at all. And so when you're looking at the time dimension of building a company, you're always at risk to these macro trends that may have nothing to do with what you're doing. But all of a sudden, the capital is simply not flowing because the venture ecosystem has tightened up and are in a reactive wait-and-see mode. You go back to, it's the third time I've been through one of these market corrections. First time was back in 2000 and 2001. And there were a couple of years in that period of time where you could walk into a venture capitalist and say, I have the cure to cancer. Take this pill. If you have cancer, it'll stop it. And if you don't have cancer, you'll never have it again. It's all proven science. It's all been validated. And the venture reaction would have been, yeah, we're not really doing that today. The capital just stops. And cancer didn't stop. Cyber threats didn't stop. But the market just stops to recalibrate, to take pause. The venture community goes to a more defensive posture of, I've got to take care of the companies I already have first before I look at adding companies. And that's the process that we are hopefully now coming out of. I will tell you what's exciting about that is that these periods of time are actually when some of the most significant and most interesting companies actually get built. It's the fact that because capital is hard to come by, because the cost is so high, it means things that get funded have to be that much better. The teams have to be that much stronger. They have to be that much more disciplined and that much more capital efficient. And so they're leaner, they're meaner, they're more focused. And that's how you build, frankly, from an investor perspective, more profitable companies, because they're getting from start to finish with less capital. The more capital it takes to get from start to finish, the less profitable the investment is at the end of the day. It doesn't mean the company at the end is any less significant or any less or more impactful. It just means the investment is more profitable. If it takes $1 billion to get to the destination versus $100 million, which one is going to be more profitable? One does it for $100 million. That's what gets funded in this environment.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding AI, right?
Yeah. The buzzword of the year, and many to come. And talking about the future and cyber specifically, what are the next trends that you're obviously not giving too much away? But what are the next trends that you see coming to light?
Well, I think, again, my worldview is through an offensive lens. So I spend time thinking about, where's the offense going? What are the sneaky bastards thinking about today? We talk a lot about artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, let's just call it what it is, machine learning today. It's whenever the marketeers get a hold of something, they take what it is and they go to the first derivative. So machine learning becomes artificial intelligence. Whatever you want to label it, it's going to have a profound impact on cybersecurity. It's going to raise the table stakes, and that's important. We'll get, it'll help us with signal and noise problems. It'll boost the productivity of analysts. We'll streamline workflows, which will be about velocity in an environment where dwell time is compressing. That's all really important. It has a huge positive impact. What we're not talking about is what are those sneaky bastards doing? And so I think about the offensive application of artificial intelligence. What happens when AI is applied to cyber attacks? And all of a sudden, an example that my friends at the NSA used 5 years ago when we first started talking about this, the breach at the Office of Personnel Management, which is a campaign that compromised about 7 years ago now, compromised 23.5 million personnel records, including classified records of U.S. government employees. And that campaign took place over 9 months, before it was eventually discovered. Now, that dwell time actually is the enemy of the hacker, because the longer the dwell time, the greater the propensity to be discovered and for some remediation to begin. But in an AI-powered environment, that 9-month campaign goes from 9 months, not to 9 weeks, not to 9 days, it goes to 9 hours. So you've been hit, data's been exfiltrated, they're out and gone before you have any idea. That's going to be the reality of the offensive application of artificial intelligence. How do we defend against that? That's a fundamental new level of threat that we're just beginning to think about. So I think about things like that. Weaponized data. We've got a global economy that is data-driven. The efficacy of those digitized systems, the confidence in those digitized systems, actually comes down to our trust in the data. What if the data is manipulated, or what I call weaponized data? Now all of a sudden, and this is classic military tactics, right? Disinformation in a warfare context. All of a sudden, can I trust my systems? Can I rely on the results that I'm getting? And if you can't rely on the results you're getting, now all that automation, all that power loses its effect. And so I think about things like this, and what does that mean for cybersecurity? And when you look at weaponized data, you don't have to compromise all the data. You talk to sort of the offensive experts in this area, it's just enough. And that's what's the definition of just enough? Just enough that you lose confidence, that you can no longer rely on the advantage that all that technology gave you. And now you start thinking about how you counter those problems. It takes you into things like data provenance, which is, classically, one of the areas where that tradecraft was developed is in national intelligence. We're collecting massive amounts of data. What is the provenance of the data? Can we trust the data? What is our confidence level? If we're going to make a decision, if we're going to take an action based on that data, we have to be able to understand the confidence level of the data upon which we're making a decision. That's going to be an entirely new area. And I think what you begin to see, that's a good example. I happen to believe, personally, that most cyber problems, not all, but most, the objective of a cyber attack is data. And what that tells me is that we need to take a data-centric approach to cybersecurity. The metaphor I always use is, the mouse is after the cheese. Secure the cheese, right? It doesn't mean you don't lay mousetraps on the path to the cheese, but understand what is the objective. The objective is not to get into your network and rattle around because you're bored. It's to get into your network, navigate to the cheese, to the treasure, and take it out. Secure the cheese, right? So that leads you to a construct of data-centric security. Okay, what does that look like? It doesn't mean network security isn't important. And when you get to things like OT, now you're actually trying to compromise the infrastructure to manipulate the infrastructure. But it's another one of those concepts of, let's think about data-centric approaches to security. Why does encryption become so important? Why does things like homomorphic encryption become so important? Because we're pretty good at securing data at rest, and we're pretty good at securing data in motion. Data in use, the adversary understands that's when it's vulnerable. That becomes a new threat vector. Okay, how do we secure, data while it's in use? This brings you to things like homomorphic, encryption. And so that's where my mind goes to when I'm thinking about the future of cybersecurity. I'm not particularly interested in things that are 10% more effective, 5% cheaper. That doesn't fundamentally move the defensive needle or the security needle against a determined adversary who wakes up every day trying to rain on your parade as hard as he possibly can.
Well, maybe we should do a rerun this time next year and see what trends have come true.
That would be a lot of fun.
And we'll make it an annual thing.
I look forward to it.
And see where it goes. Well, absolute brilliant conversation. Pleasure having you on board.
Oliver, it's really a pleasure.
Looking forward to
enjoyed the conversation. All right, my friend.
Rerun. Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this latest episode of CyberBytes, the podcast. Please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and tell your friends. If you want to explore being a guest or how Aspiron Search can help you build high-performing security and go-to-market teams, then get in touch on LinkedIn or info@aspironsearch.com.